Welcome to the Taking Flight podcast. I'm Henry Freeman, as always, alongside Charlie Andrade. And today we're joined by Eric Eager, who works for PFF.
Currently, it is a beautiful Thursday afternoon, and we are going to be talking about PFF grading system, Darnold's future with the Jets and with the league, and what Eric believes the future for the Jets should look like from an analytical perspective. So, just get off the bat. How are you, Eric? How you doing?
Things are okay. I mean, the first 2 weeks of the season always have their bumps, but I can't complain. We're gonna have a good, nice little game tonight here with Jacksonville and Miami, and
Oh,
it'll be fun.
yeah, it should be. Um, and I just wanted to ask you, first of all, going into the season, Darnold has had a pretty tumultuous offseason, right? COVID, Adam Gase. But from your perspective, let's say Darnold continues the trend he's on, which is like below average, probably quarterback play, and the Jets end up with the first overall pick. What do you believe the Jets should be doing from that perspective?
Yeah, I think it really depends upon how they arrive at the first overall pick. I mean, I think the conventional wisdom is if they're bad enough to get the first pick, Darnold will have not been good enough to, warrant a second contract. And so then he's playing for his career. In a similar way, I mean, people don't remember this, but, Drew Brees was, the 32nd pick, I believe. And then he was okay and then had been benched and played so poorly near the end of 0203 that the San Diego Chargers at the time traded for Phillip Rivers, and basically Breeze was a sitting duck. And in 2004, he took the Chargers to a 12-4 season, and then made that decision tougher. I think if you're a Jets fan, that's kind of the best case scenario, right? Where you look at Darnold might not be bad enough to be the reason they're the number one overall pick. I think there's probably a number of things, like obviously how they've handled the cap, where the lack of really talented players at premium positions like wide receiver, cornerback, edge, things like that. But if they're the number one pick and that's one of the most valuable assets that any team's going to have over the next few years, you take Lawrence, you take Fields, and then you have Darnold start for a year, and sort of see how it goes from there with a different coach. I think that's obviously the sort of the path there. It's just hard because Darnold hasn't had a fair shake, I don't think, but at the same time, you can't continue to live in purgatory because you haven't been fair to your quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, as you and George were talking about on the pod maybe a few days ago, I know you guys recorded different dates than you produced, but you guys were talking about how at this point, or no, sorry, this wasn't you and Eric. This was, I believe, Sam and Steve. Yeah. Yes. Steve Palazzolo. But they were talking about how Darnold has already proven that he can't succeed without a roster around him, basically. So how much trade value would the Jets have going into a season with the first overall pick, preferably Trevor Lawrence, probably? So realistically, what do you think, A, a most likely landing spot would be for Darnold, and B, what the Jets could get? I know Minnesota and 49ers kind of ring a bell.
Well, I think once you've already committed to trading a guy, it's really tricky to get much for him. I mean, the best that we've seen for a quarterback who is sort of middle of the pack like that is Sam Bradford of the Eagles. And that was a situation where they had moved mountains to get Carson Wentz, but Carson was viewed as sort of a developmental prospect, and they were going to go into the season, the first season under Doug Peterson with Bradford, and then Teddy Bridgewater tore his knee up pretty badly, and the Vikings, hit the panic button and traded a number one pick. To me, I think that's kind of where the Jets have to be. I mean, the fact of the matter is Darnold's still relatively inexpensive for a starting quarterback. The two of them, the number one overall pick and him would not be, all that much more than a top tier starter on a veteran deal, or even, I think it'd be less even. So I don't think you have to trade Darnold in that situation. So I think what you do is you keep Darnold around. You address the head coach situation, and then you draft a guy with the number one pick, and then you have them both on the same roster. And then if a team is desperate, we've seen that a number of times. Tannehill tore his ACL during, Bradford himself tore his
Mhm.
ACL during a preseason, and a team gets desperate, then you have a chip, whether that be actually the first pick, or your veteran guy in Darnold.
Yeah, definitely. And, going in, obviously the Jets probably couldn't get much, especially, but what would you think about a trade to Minnesota or San Francisco, and how would that look as a landing spot for a quarterback who, hasn't seen much success and be jumping from?
I think it'd be hard. I mean, because the issue is,
Mhm.
I mean, Garoppolo is inexpensive. I believe, the dead money there is basically minimal if they were to get rid of him. But I don't see Darnold as any better than Garoppolo. And the hard part is if he shows promise in that offense, they're probably going to have to pay him more than what they're paying Garoppolo. So I don't really see, that much of an upside
Mhm.
there. Minnesota's even worse in the sense that every year that Cousins is on the roster, he costs money for
Oh my
year
gosh.
N plus one, and so
Yeah.
that one, I think Minnesota really does have to address the position with a younger player or a cheaper player,
Mhm.
because at that point you're just spending too much at the position. And given Darnold's history, there's not much upside there.
Mhm. And, Henry, if you want to add anything to this, I mean,
Yeah,
questions here.
absolutely. Yeah. Let's think. So, do you think you're high on Trevor Lawrence as like everyone?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I actually think that Justin Fields was better than him last year, and played harder competition. Um,
Mhm.
and I wish I could have seen him play LSU, because that's really where Lawrence struggled. His accuracy issues were really apparent in that game. He struggled early in the year too with turnovers and stuff like that. I mean, they're both, in
Yeah.
my opinion, blue chip prospects. But after you kind of do all the math, Fields looks better now. Um, but Lawrence hasn't. Lawrence is going to get to play more games than Fields this year, and we'll get to see it. Clemson's schedule being low key easy every year is really a tricky part of the evaluation. But I don't think either team is pick one or two is going to get a bad player.
Yeah, definitely. And just going into this season, especially, I'm curious to see what you would think what the Jets should do with let's say Darnold plays out and you have the opportunity to trade out, and I know trading out, analytically is usually a very good opportunity, but is it worth losing a Fields or a Lawrence?
No, and this is the thing that we've learned as a company since the first time the Jets, when the Jets made a big trade. Um, Quarterbacks offer so much more value than other positions. So if
Uh-huh.
you're going to take a quarterback with the first overall pick is worth about four times as many wins over the course of a rookie deal than another position. So like Penei Sewell is probably going to be amazing, but like even if he's Joe Thomas, like
Hmm.
it's not going to matter nearly as much as hitting on a player, of Lawrence's caliber. And you see that, you see that in Kansas City, you see that in Baltimore, you see that in Houston. Like when you hit on a quarterback, it just changes everything,
Yeah.
whereas, Cleveland hit on Joe Thomas with the third overall pick in 2007 and had one winning season, and it was his rookie year. Those players are brilliant, and their absence can hurt, I think about them in poker, right? Like, their absence can hurt a hand, right? But it
Yeah.
can't make a hand, right?
Hmm.
Um, you know, and that's really like the issue. I mean, the Jets' problems I think go deeper, right, than obviously quarterback, but like a quarterback can cover a multitude of sins. I mean, look at Houston, look at even Seattle. I think Seattle's well run, but coaching
Yeah.
wise, they have a ways to go. So you go for the QB there, and especially given, I mean, here's the other thing about the Jets, and this is sort of galaxy brain into the future, but you got a ton of draft picks for Jamal Adams, and you're the next first round pick, the marginal value of that player. Like, let's say a team wants to trade up from 6 to 1, and they give you another first round pick in addition to 6. Well, that first round pick means a lot to the Rams, who have none. It means less to the Jets, who have two, right, and then two the next year. And then there's also the issue of, if all those players are all more likely to work out than a second round pick or a third round pick, and then you're into salary cap hell later on, because you have to do what some of these teams who are strapped, the Rams, for example, pay all those guys, and
Yeah.
so I don't think the Jets, if they get a pick in the top three, should just use it on a quarterback.
Okay, but yeah, I totally agree. And if Henry, you want to add anything right now?
Uh,
Um,
yeah, actually, throwing it back to Darnold, I was just thinking about something Charlie said last episode, which I've completely taken as my own thing. There was a campaign to let Russ cook,
yeah.
and Charlie had said hashtag let Sam cook, and I absolutely love that, and I've completely adapted it into my moniker. And do you believe in that? You think if Sam Darnold has the ability to throw the ball downfield, their Jets have more success?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Adam Gaze's biggest failure in Miami was how much he ran the ball to Frank Gore when Kenyon Drake was on the team. His biggest failure. I mean, you look at like Ryan Tannehill, for example, was pretty much a dink and dunk, quarterback. Then he goes to Tennessee and he leads the league in efficiency. Um, Jay Cutler was a pretty good quarterback with the Bears and was awful with the Dolphins, so on and so forth, right? Matt Moore was a backup who could win a Super Bowl in Kansas City, and he was terrible with the Miami Dolphins. And then you look at the Jets, and it's sort of the same thing. Um, Josh McCown was actually fairly efficient with the Jets in 2000, and was it 17? And then
18.
yeah, and then he gets
Something like
around.
Yeah,
I don't know. He wasn't with Gaze. Never mind. I
that
take
was the
that.
Bulls. Yeah.
I
and
take
Bowles
that
was a
one
vertical passer a lot
I
of the
take
times.
that one back. I take
Hmm.
that one back. But Gaze's effect on an offense has been well documented as after he left Chicago, pretty poor.
Hmm.
And you know the hard part about this, and this is where the double-edged sword comes in, and which is why tanking I feel like is a smart move. The Jets had to move up 3 picks and give up what, a third of a draft to do it, and a
Yeah.
lot of the means by which they got Darnold are the means by which they're struggling with Darnold, which is that they don't have the weapons and they don't have pass protection. Although Mekhi Becton's played really well,
Yeah.
so that I want, I obviously think Darnold should be allowed to drop back and throw more. He should be allowed to have, sort of more things that are conducive to success. It's just like, okay, well, who's he going to throw to? How efficient can they be when his wide receivers, are not necessarily of NFL caliber on a week to week basis?
Hmm. And kind of going a little bit back to the draft thing, we can move on to Mekhi Becton. Um, I would argue, and I'm totally analytics and all for that. But for the Jets, how many wins is a Trevor Lawrence worth compared to a Jamar Chase and a, let's say, Greg Rousseau and another offensive lineman? Like, are those three skill position players, wide receiver, lineman, and cornerback being the most important of a team, second most, and third most, and fourth most? But my point is that how valuable are those players, let's say four like blue chip or almost blue chip prospects compared to one uber talented quarterback?
Well, so like if you get even somebody like Baker Mayfield's rookie year, that's like 2.5 wins.
Hmm.
Um, if you get if Jamar Chase plays like Odell Beckham in his rookie year, you're talking about half a win, maybe a full win if you're lucky.
Hmm.
So it's just an order of magnitude difference.
Yeah.
Rousseau is Rousseau is kind of in the edge players. The hard part about edge players is that they're not worth as much as people think, but he's amazing. The hard part about Rousseau is he's every bit as big of a gamble as the quarterback, right? Because we've
Yeah.
only seen 1 year of him play at Miami, and it was only like 500 snaps, and it was great. But then they were also doing a lot of things to make his pass rush reps easier, like moving him over a college guard and all that stuff. So, uh, you know, the hard part is, there's not a whole lot. I mean, Penei Sewell will be amazing in the NFL, in my estimation. He's the best pass protector we've seen in our system. But, you know, if you have a quarterback that when he hits his back foot, when clean, can't consistently make plays, then your left tackle is meaningless at some point, at some level, right? Because, the guy's got to be a finisher. So, it's to me it's quarterback. And again, like, even if, like, what do you guys think if Darnold is, let's say Darnold finishes the year 16th in the league in grade, PFF grade, or
Yeah.
whatever you want to use, passer rating or whatever, is that enough?
To me, it personally is. I think considering that he's in a dink and dunk system with Gase, or it's more conservative traditionalist, in my opinion. I think that 16th in that system is pretty dang good. I think because you're on a rookie contract, it's not that much of a gamble. You have another year left with a fifth-year option to exercise, so why not ride it out? See if he can do good with an offensive-minded head coach that they might bring in or something. Give
Mhm.
him one more year with a new head coach, see if anything changes, and then make your decision. Is my point.
So yeah, because here's my thing. I disagree with you, but I can see where you come from, because the having two quarterbacks means that your chances of failure are so much lower, right? You think about them both as coin flips, right? It all you need is one quarterback to be successful. The probability that at least one, let's say they're both 50-50 to be successful. The probability that at least one of them is successful is 75%, right?
Yeah.
And the probability that both bust are 25%. So you took your chances of success and raised them, 50% by just padding a little bit of that issue. So that's kind of where I am. Where if he's 16th in the league, it's a Bradford Wentz situation, because then you give yourself an opportunity. You're not ready. Like, Jets are going to be ready to win the Super Bowl next year.
No,
And
yeah.
neither were the Eagles in 2016. But what did they do? They traded they traded the asset of Bradford to the Vikings for the 13th pick in the 2017 draft. They got Derek Barnett, who sacked Tom Brady to
Mhm.
end the game in the Super Bowl in 2017. Like, those things, like, and again, it's because you had two assets that were coveted by people in the NFL. If they, I think that that's something that they can sort of continue to push with moving forward.
Yeah, totally. But and I understand the two quarterback thing. The metrics behind that make sense. But and I'm not trying to go Chris Sims on you, but is the locker room possible like disputes worth that extra quarterback wins, like 2 or 3 wins? Is the team morale with two quarterbacks, and you know who your leader is? Does that equal, how much of a greater effect is that on the D line or the O line or the receivers?
I think so. Because here's the thing. Like, I think most people in an NFL locker room just want to live. Just want to, like, they're not worried about these things, right?
Yeah.
They're worried about, like, if I'm a wide receiver in that system, I'm thinking to myself, okay, like, I don't really care who the quarterback is, because Sam has been such an up and down player for us. Maybe getting somebody in here to light a fire, I don't really care who it is, right? The good example was very much, the Chargers. But even if you go all the way back, like, think about one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the league, and this is way before you youngsters were ever born.
Yeah.
But in 1991, the Falcons traded the Falcons were drafted Brett Favre in the second round.
Oh yeah.
Chris Miller made the Pro Bowl in 1991, and they were able to flip Favre for a first-round pick to the Packers. Now, everybody's saying, okay, that was ends up being a terrible trade, but it was only because Chris Miller tore his knee up, like, literally 4 weeks into the 92 season, right? And then Favre took over. But, like, you can never have enough quarterbacks, because other teams don't have enough, right? Other teams are where the Jets are, right? Where they're looking for just competence at the position. If you can demonstrate that in two players, you can get something. I mean, look at Arizona. They got a third-round pick for Josh
Second,
Rosen.
actually.
Second.
But
That looks
yeah.
like a steal now, doesn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, like, because he's terrible. He doesn't have a whole lot left in him. And so even though he looked horrible as a rookie, and so much so that you took a different player with the first pick the next year, you still got a good asset for that pick.
Totally. And so yeah, that's a really good point. The locker room benefits probably, or pitfalls probably, only come when you have a player like a Jamal Adams or someone else who is really a superstar and can voice out with not being cut or traded. Well, I guess Jamal was traded, but yeah. So if Henry, you want to ask anything, or you got anything in your mind? If
Um,
not, oh yeah.
from an analytical standpoint, who won the Seahawks Jets trade for Jamal Adams?
It was the Jets by a wide margin. Here's the thing, and again, sometimes these trades can have different utilities for different teams. So Jamal Adams could be worth, half a win to 1 win per year. That means so much less to a Jets team who is probably going to be vying between 4 and 5 wins, right? That fifth win is relatively meaningless to you guys.
Yeah.
The
Would rather not
Seahawks are
have it.
trying to go from 11 to 12 wins and win the NFC West and get a first round bye in the playoffs. That win has so much more utility for the Seattle Seahawks than it does the Jets. So even though I still would not price that half a win to 1 win as 2 first round picks, Bradley McDougald and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it I can see where the Seahawks come from. The Jets still fleeced them. I mean, I would have put the price at probably the 15th pick in the draft, which is way more than the Jets got.
Yeah. And great question, Henry. But to finish our Jets section off, we can go to the grades. Mekhi Becton, you guys had him, and I agreed to this at the time, and maybe we'll still, but you had him probably, was it 32nd overall, I believe?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously he has been one of the best rookies, if not probably maybe the best that we've seen so far. And I'm just wondering, what do you think the course is with Mekhi Becton? Because it does seem like he's cleaned up a lot of what in Louisville, when he only played like 250 real pass snaps. Like, do you think that he can? What's his trajectory going to be finishing this year, and going forward?
Yeah. So he's got about an 80 overall grade. Just one. He's only given up 4 pressures this entire time, 1 penalty. It's a really good start for him. I mean, the thing with him was always like, it wasn't that we thought he was poor. I mean, in a draft where there weren't so many blue chip prospects at the position who had played a lot of snaps that were NFL caliber, we would have had him higher. It was just the Wirfses of the world, and Tristan Wirfs was great last week. The guy for Cleveland, Jedrick Wills, Andrew Thomas, he's just a pro. All those things knocked Becton a little bit, not because we thought he was bad, but because we knew less about him. It's very similar to this idea of, do you want to draft Brock Purdy versus Trey Lance at quarterback?
Yeah.
We have a lot of data on Purdy, and it's generally okay, although they lost to Louisiana the other week. Garbage.
Yeah.
But we know, but Trey Lance has a lot of good data, but not enough good data, right? And good data that we have a hard time understanding because it's against Division I AA or FCS schools. And so it's not so much a, hey, this guy sucks. It's more of a, we know less about this guy because he's playing certain things. But I think obviously because the Jets' real issues over the past bunch of years is just that they are very poor at premium positions, right? And tackle is one of those where if you want to pay a tackle in free agency, you got to pay. It's like starting pitchers in baseball. Even for an average guy, you're paying $10-15 million a year. So it's just not great. If you can draft that guy, then he's really inexpensive, and you get a huge value for 3-4 years. And that's something that they've gotten here. So that I think is a good thing for them.
Yeah. Totally. And Henry, if you want to finish off anything, be my guest, or if not, we could move on. But no pressure. Anything
I'm
you
curious. Let's do the grades. Let's figure this out.
Well, I'll be frank. I'm the mathematician in the company. I don't grade the players. I do know how they're graded, but as far as I'm not sitting there watching every play and charting the grades. I mean, we have a team of 300-400 people that are going through and watching the game. So it goes through, it goes through and sort of we chart all the information, but then also we go through and we basically on every play, a guy's given a grade, plus 0.5 to plus 1, minus 0.5 and 1. And then some math goes in and basically says, okay, well, how hard was this assignment? And then that kind of adjusts the grades, and then it gets put onto a 0 to 100 scale.
Awesome.
And that's kind of it. And there's not really, these manuals that people, who work for us, they're extremely heavy. And obviously there's a lot there. But that's kind of the process.
And yeah, totally. So I see this all the time on Twitter. I know I tweet about this so much that I'm so tired of these PFF jokes. Always really have. And but okay, so let's say do PFF grades account for a quarterback's I don't know, scheme, let's say like assignment? Like how easy is that throw?
Yes, that for sure. So for example, if you throw, so let's say you get a plus point 0.5 throw, like on third down and 8, backed up at your own 20 against 5-man pressure, it's going to get a small bump in
Hmm.
grade versus 3rd and 4 from the opponent's 40 with no pressure. If you're a quarterback, there's like so our graders grade the play like wholesale, and then the math goes in and says, well, historically, it's actually a lot easier to get a 0.5
Hmm.
on this grade, so on play. So we're going to deduct a little bit, or historically, it's not actually that. We hardly ever see a really good grade from this situation, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I know I was a while ago. I was watching PF Pro Football Talk, and I just wanted to address this too. So, yeah, so let's say I'm Drew Brees and I have Michael Thomas on a slant, a 7-yard slant going this way, and I have Emmanuel Sanders wide open, let's say 40 yards away, and I pass to Thomas for the 7-yard slant. Does the PFF grade account for the 40-yard Emmanuel Sanders open? And is that accounted for? Like, do you guys account for potentially open pass?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a throw into tight coverage and you make a perfect throw, it's fairly. I mean, it's more highly graded than a busted coverage. Yep.
Yeah, awesome. And finally, I will just ask probably this final question. Do you ever get tired of the PFF stuff on the timeline?
No, I mean, I used to for sure. I mean, I used to get in all these arguments, but ultimately, like, I mean, like our main account just tweeted out what I said on the forecast yesterday, which was that no McCaffrey makes the Panthers offense better
Mhm.
because they'll run less. And of course, people are going to get pissed at me, and it's and but what you want to do, and I think you can't learn without starting conversations, right? And in
Mhm.
many ways, you can't start conversations. We're seeing this. I've seen your tweet before. I think you and I are similar politically. You
Yeah.
can't start conversations about things in the world without upsetting people who want things the way that they are. And you can't and football is fluffy, right? Like I used to be a math professor that had so much more social utility than what I'm doing
Yeah.
currently. But it's the same thing in football. Like you can't make progress on football until you piss off people who are
Yeah.
who want football to be the same. And we saw that this week with the Cowboys going for 2 down 9.
Oh my
We saw
God.
we've seen it with the whole play. You don't need to actually be good at running the football to run
Aaron
play act.
Donald.
Yeah, all this stuff, the conversation is getting going, and of course there are going to be people that sort of drive by and call you stupid, or
Mhm.
they say your credibility's lost and all this kind of stuff. But people don't punt. People, you know you just got to let that stuff go, because a lot of people, and here's the other thing, I mean, a lot of people just are really struggling, right? So, and some people take it out on you on the online, and you have to know that it's not personal. And so it's just one of those things you let brush off, but it did it of course got to me at first.
Yeah, I feel
Uh,
like. Oh, sorry.
no, you can go ahead, Henry.
Go ahead. Okay. I feel like I'm on a much smaller level. Of course, I only have like 2,000 followers on Instagram, but even so, when I started out making jersey swaps, I tried to put Von Miller in a Jets jersey, and I had absolutely zero knowledge of Photoshop, and it went basically exactly what you expect it would go. And so I got hate comments. I'm like, okay. And so I fought back with my burner account. And then I did that for about a month, and then I realized how stupid I was, and eventually it just didn't let it get to me. I think everyone has that thing in them where they get hate, they fight back at first and realize you can't do anything about it except for get better and improve yourself. And I figured you can't improve yourself. I mean, your PFF, your math is right, but you just have to let it not get to you.
Yeah. And I might be the only one of the few buyers woman of the PFF sweatshirt.
There
I
you
have
go.
my MacBook right here with the PFS sticker. But yeah, definitely. I mean, you see me on Twitter. I try not to make myself like affiliated with PFF because I know I tweet a lot of dumb stuff and get a lot of online
Look,
arguments.
you're like the only person that Neil follows that doesn't work
Oh,
for him, so
you don't. Every single day of my life, I go into my DMs, scroll down to Neil, and check if he's still following me. It is so much anxiety from that, but yeah, I think
Neil's a
yeah,
good guy.
definitely. If he hasn't muted up me already, I wouldn't blame him if he did. Well, you know what? Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Awesome that you just, I know we don't have many viewers or we're getting there, but it's really cool that you spent some time with us today, talk football, talk Darnold, talk grades. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys. You guys are great.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, thank you so much again. This is PFF Eric at PFF_Eric on Twitter. And, again, thank you so much for coming on, man.
All right, and so that should do it for our podcast too. As always, Henry Freeman at NY Jets Island on Twitter, at just Jets Island on Instagram.
And
There's
I
Charlie
am
Andrade.
just looking up my name on Twitter.
Just look him up. Just look his name up, and we'll see you after the Indianapolis game, which should most likely end in horrific failure. But we'll see. Be optimistic. All right.
All right.
Bye.